Welcome, social media navigators.
Hey, listen!
Yes, those guys and you too navigating through the social media platforms and our channel. Thank you so much for checking this video out. If this is your very first time checking us out, welcome. Thank you so much for stopping by. Today I will be talking about the mini consoles I own and will be ranking them based on my personal point of view. These rankings are not based on the professional critics. So keep that in mind because everything that I'm going to share on this video are just solely based on what I've experienced from console to console when I played them. So let's get started because you may be surprised on the order I rank these puppies. So the first order of business, we're gonna start with the mini console I put at the bottom of the barrel, and I think these might come in as an obvious choice for most people, if not all. These will be the PlayStation Classic. There are many pros I have with these sucker pile of trash. I don't know what it is really, because the only thing good about these is the looks of it, the aesthetics of it. It looks cute, but that's about it. The control looks and feels well when you play, but you know, it would have been preferable to have the analog controllers. These controllers are actually just a little bit tinier than the original PlayStation controllers, whereas the other mini consoles, the controllers that came packed in, are pretty much the same size as the originals of those consoles that came out on their respective eras. So this is the only thing the PlayStation has going on for itself. From here on out, it's all cons. It all goes downhill.
No fucking way!
Well, the cons, let's start. The price, $100? Seriously, just for 20 games. The selection of games, the emulation, the lack of classic games that gave the significance of what the PlayStation became to be, and just a lazy ass menu interface. I don't recommend to anyone to get this console, or whatever, if you even dare to call it a console. Don't recommend it to anyone to get it, unless you get it for pennies on the dollar, which is pretty much why I got mine. Otherwise, I wouldn't have any interest on picking this up. Or maybe if you get it as a gift, that would only be one reason why you own one of these suckers. But, well, thinking about it, if someone gives it to you as a gift, sorry to say, but that person probably doesn't like you either. If you manage to get your hands on one of these things, the only thing I would suggest is for you to mod the hell out of it, for you to even get the bare minimum enjoyment out of it. I only got these for $20. But even then, if you get a really good deal of it, you may still need to cash out additional dough to get it modded.
I don't think so.
So, $20, another however much you may want to spend on getting it modded, you'll be paying at least $30 unless, like I said, unless you get it for free. And that's pretty much all the PlayStation Classic has going on for itself. The next one is the NES Classic. Oh, but hold on, before you get your pitchforks out, the NES Classic towards the bottom of the barrel? Well, yes, but I will share why I have it on my 5th place. Let's start with the games. All of the games on this collection, every single one of them, symbolized what the Nintendo became to be. Every single game on this collection is, or was, or became a classic at some point to someone, at least to someone across the globe. These released at $60 with 10 more games than the PlayStation Classic, with a selection I would personally rate 10 out of 10. So why am I placing it on 5th place? For me, as a great value that this little puppy comes in packed with, I didn't really get much additional value out of it because I personally already own a physical copy of every single game in this compilation. I will explain a bit more about these on my next mini console ranking. You may be wondering, if this is pretty much a 10 out of 10 console, why am I rating these too low? Well, let's jump into that. So let's start with the cons. First and most obvious is the cord extension of the controller. Look at this, I can perfectly fit it right here into the frame of the camera. That's how short it is. That's freaking disappointing. This kind of pissed me off in the beginning because I knew better that this was sort of a greedy ass dick move from Nintendo, because right from the day of release of the NES Classic, they were selling those extensions. So they knew they had fucked up in a way and then thought, oh, you know what, let's just sell additional cables for an additional $10 and drain the wallets out of our consumers. This was not a problem where after the fact, after the consumers were complaining that the cords were too short, there wasn't a point where they realized, oh, you know what, yeah, we messed up, sorry about that, here, we'll send additional extension cords. No, it was not like that. They knew right from the get-go, hey, why not fuck the consumer's wallet for an additional $10, $15? I kind of understood why you have to have short cables, short cords, because you literally have to have the console within arm's reach for you to reach out for the reset button, because that was the only way for you to go back out to the menu or to the other features as the save features of the games or whatever you were trying to get out of your gameplay. I found that kind of inconvenient, but it is something that the other consoles were able to figure out. Oh God, not only did they give us a short cable, but they only gave us one controller. Like, what the fadoodles, half of these games are a two-player games. What were they thinking? Like, yeah, let's fuck the consumers for an additional $10, $15. So not only did Nintendo intended to fuck our wallet by having us buy extension cords, but they sure as hell try to rape the hell out of our wallets by making us buy an additional controller with an additional extension cord, if you chose to. But you know what? Joke's on you, Nintendo, because suck it. You did not get my money, because guess what? You can plug in your SNES controllers onto the NES Mini. Ha! Even the Wii Pro controller. Last but not least, I want to talk about a minor con. Something that Nintendo has been very notorious for being as this in the past. Producing limited quantities. And not only did they produce limited quantities of the NES Mini Classic Edition, but they produce super limited quantities. And I know this is a whole new topic that we can discuss separately, but without going much into detail, Nintendo knew that this was going to be a really extremely heavily demanded item, and they still went ahead and produced very limited quantities. If it wasn't because of Reggie, the former president of Nintendo of America, spoke up and told Nintendo, hey dudes, guys, we're leaving a lot of money here on the table. Look at how much people are willing to overpay only because us, dicks, don't want to produce enough quantities, at least to produce for half the population, half of the Nintendo fan base. And all the scalpers are getting all the money. Look guys, let's produce some more. And sure enough, a year later, and that's when I managed to grab myself an NES Mini and an additional one for a gift. And to be honest, I didn't really care or try to rush my ass onto the stores on the first wave, on the first batch of the original release date of the NES Mini, because like I said, I already own the physical copies of all of these games. Next is the SNES Mini, the Super Nintendo Mini. Yes, you're wondering why I have these Nintendo consoles at the bottom of the barrel. The ones who started the whole mini console trend. Well, I'm gonna share my points. Let's start with the pros. Look at it. It's a great, good, cute looking console. The controllers, at least they had a decent sized cord, but look, it's still not so lengthy, but still longer than the NES. The controller feels really nice, if not even better than the originals. But the size, it's about the same, and everything feels as authentic as it should feel. Game selection was superb as well. Top notch. But there is a little but, which I'm gonna talk about in my cons of this console. With the NES Mini, just as with the NES Mini, I already own the physical copies for most of the games in this compilation as well, except for some of the current pricey physical titles such as Super Mario RPG, Earthbound, and Final Fantasy III, which I never cared to collect and acquire these games anyway because I'm not a big RPG fan. I really wanted to get these, not just as a collector, as a fan, but because of the cream of the crop, Star Fox 2. Seriously, I only got it because of that, because of Star Fox 2, the game that was never released here officially in North America. Even if I wanted to go try to hunt for a repro copy of Star Fox 2, I'm probably not gonna pay anything under $20, $30, $40, or even $50 for a repro copy. So I'm like, heck, this was only 86 bucks. It's a good deal. I mean, not to mention that if you were to buy all of these games separately, you're gonna sure spend hundreds of dollars. Overall, the emulation, the sound, the features of the menu interface the SNES had to offer was top notch. Now I'm gonna talk about the cons. The price, it wasn't bad. Now this is just my personal take on it and my sole observation. I think that after Nintendo heard all the criticism of the NES Mini having only one controller with a really short cord, they decided to throw in, yes, a second controller, of course with the longer extension cord, and they figured, $10 to $5 to $10 for each controller plus the extension. The original NES Mini was $60. When we add the additional controller with the additional inches of the extension cord, we can easily sell it for 80 bucks. Even though you bet your ass that the cost to manufacture the additional control and the additional inches that you would get in the cord, it was just pennies on the dollar. Probably no more than $1 or $2 for the controller and the additional extension length of the cords. They thought that by selling everything together, the second controller, the additional length of the cords, they thought that, ooh, that would offset everything we didn't really do with the NES Mini. But I am no fool, I know that was not the case. Now the answer also lies on how many games the SNES Mini came with in comparison to the NES Classic. It only came with 20 games, 21 to be exact, but fudge, 10 games less than the NES Mini? You will argue, dude, don't be so picky. If you were to buy physical copies of every single game in this collection, just like I said a minute ago, you'd be paying up the ass. And of course, I will not argue that. This is actually a great value on the games alone. Heck, Final Fantasy III and Super Mario RPG, they're averaging at least $40 to $50 to $60 nowadays, at least as of the date of this video. Shit, Earthbound, it's up on the couple hundreds. But again, in my personal take, I don't give two shits about either one of those games. Last con I want to mention about the SNES Mini, it's something minor that came in with the cosmetic of the SNES Mini. I know that Nintendo wanted to replicate the exact aesthetics of what the console looked like inside out, on every side, on every angle. But with that came a way in which they had to figure out how to plug in the controllers, which had the exact same connection as the NES mini controllers or the Wii Pro controllers. I think it would have been easier if they would have just had a USB port, but because it looks kind of weird when you're playing these. No big deal, since you're gonna be paying attention to your gameplay and not down at the console looking at the ports, but it still looks weird. Next is the Neo Geo Mini International. Well, let's start with the pros. Look at these. Very original. Little mini arcade cap. The aesthetics of the console. This may have been a ballsy move on deciding to go with a mini arcade cap looking console, but I believe it was quite a unique touch they did with these, and not like it because the original Neo was not one of the best appealing looking consoles. It was not an ugly one, but not one that stands out from the crowd of consoles when it comes to appearances. The emulation on this puppy, it's one of the best ones from all of the mini consoles. When you play this puppy on portable mode or just through the arcade, it sure is a beefy little rascal, as the video, sound, controls and emulation is on point. Although the menu interface didn't have much going on for itself, nothing special, it sure looked much better than the PlayStation Classic. The game catalog selection and released asking price were not bad, but in my personal take, I would put these 2 points in the gray area between the pros and cons. Keep in mind that these reviews are solely based on my personal observations and experiences playing these consoles, and nothing else. The game selection is something I personally think could have been a little bit different. Not just speaking as a consumer opinion giving preference to a particular game, but I'll explain why I have a little bit of an issue with this game selection. Even though, I must note, this isn't a bad selection per se. These games I'm gonna mention are not bad at all. In the contrary, they're all classics. Their franchises became classic Neo Geo library staples. But I didn't find it appealing to have the need to put several installments of the same franchise in this compilation. For instance, there are 6 Metal Slug games, 5 King of Fighter games. Jesus, you have Metal Slug 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and Metal Slug X. You have King of Fighters 95, 97, 98, 2000 and 2002. Personally, I think 1 or 2 too many games of the same franchise. But damn, they sure left out Samurai Showdown, the first game. They left out Art of Fighting 2, which I believe is the best of the trilogy. They left out Spin Master, they left out Pull Start, a great, fantastic shooter. They left out Baseball Stars. Although not a big sports fan right here, the game looks great. Another one I'm not a huge fan of, but was a great Neo Geo title, was Puzzle Bobble. But that's just to say the least about the game selection. The Neo Geo Mini International released here in the US at just over $100. Not bad, but it was sure leaning towards the steep side. I will explain how and why as I go into the cons of it. What you got for $100 asking price, $110 to be exact before taxes, was a compilation of 40 games that alone was superiority over the PlayStation and Nintendo mini consoles. The cons primarily consist of what the console didn't come with. The console didn't come in with a USB box adapter. No big deal, as I personally have quite several of these laying around home. No big deal, but it is imperative that you use the proper adapter, because if you don't, you could fry your console or short circuit the board. and I'm sure you don't want to do either. I'll explain more on these later on. The Neo Geo Mini didn't even come with a controller pad. When you take it right out of the box, that's pretty much all you get. The arcade cabinet and the power cable. Now, if you have big hands, this was really uncomfortable because you have to crunch up your fingers, your hand like this, and especially if you were even playing for any longer than 20-15 minutes, that's it, your hands would give out because it is very tiring to play in this position to be able to play. Even though the controls here through the arcade are pretty darn good and responsive. But even for a guy like me with average size hands, it became really uncomfortable after a while, therefore forcing me to buy a controller pad. Second con I have about the Neo Geo Mini is that it didn't come with an HDMI cable. No big deal, I said I have tons of those laying around home as well. But oh no, Neo Geo had to come in with their dick move and say no, it's not just a generic HDMI cable, it's a mini HDMI cable, and of course I had to go out of my way and buy one separately as well. And now this means that you would have to cash out an additional $20 to $30, depending where you get it, for the HDMI mini cable. Seriously, who in their right mind would think that somebody would want to play these just through the arcade mode? One last thing I want to say about the Neo Geo Mini, it's a little feature that is actually kind of a pro, and it's a feature that all the mini consoles going on forward had, and was very convenient even with the long extension cord. For you to be able to access the menu, all you have to do is press a combination of a couple of buttons or just one single button depending on the console, and press, hold it, and that will take you straight to the menu. At my number 2 spot, it's none other than the Sega Genesis Mini.
Hell yes, Mexican!
Let's start with the aesthetics of it. The only thing different on this mini console is the USB ports for the controllers and of course the back connections. And they don't stand out in a bad way where it takes away from the cosmetics of it. It's something that I think the SNES Mini could have tried to figure out on how they could replicate the controller connections onto the console. The cartridge dust cover actually opens, it flaps open. The headphones volume level actually moves up and down. Heck, even the back cover, you can still pop it out just like the original Genesis did. Although there's no board there, but still pretty neat little detail that they actually put the minimal thought to replicate it as close as possible to what the original looked like. And that's why I think the Genesis Mini takes a higher spot over the SNES or the consoles that I already mentioned. Just aesthetically speaking, it takes the cake. The Genesis Mini was released at the same price as the SNES Mini, $80 here in the US, but it comes with 42 games, whereas the SNES Mini had only 21. So we're talking about twice as much of a value we're getting here alone with the games. The Genesis Mini console also came with 2 controllers, and even though they were only the 3-button controllers, the extension, the length of the cords were long enough for you to be able to set your console quite a few feet in front of you, which was another neat feature I'll talk about in a minute, that you didn't have to lean and reach over to the console to access the main menu, because you could control everything right from the controller, as the word implies, and it is. It's a controller. You should be able to control everything from your controller. All you have to do on the 3-button controller is press and hold the start button, and that will take you to the other features, either take you to the main menu or to the menu where you would be able to save your gameplay. The game selection is just phenomenal, superb. The only game I don't like out of these selection is Tetris, which is why I think they just threw it in as a bonus game, because it sucks. And for as much of a Mega Man fan I am, I would love to love Mega Man The Wily Wars, but it's okay. Look and sounds great, but since it's a PAL game, it plays slower, and you can totally see when you're shooting around. But the catalog of the games you get with this compilation is nearly unbeatable. There were a couple of titles that were absent from this collection, but still doesn't take away from how great this mini console is. The emulation is top notch, and most of the games run faster than on the original Genesis, all at 60 Hz. The audio is just on point as well. Although I've heard the audio is laggy and overall quality is lower, I have not experienced it so. On the contrary, I think the audio sounds far better than the original Genesis because the highs, the mids, and lows are perfectly equalized. At least with the current audio setup I have. For those who may have experienced laggy or lower audio quality, it may just be their personal setups. But these sort of features will vary from person to person, from home setups to home setups. I currently have a Sony 5.1 Dolby Digital audio receiver and have had it for at least 10 years, and it sounds as great as the first day I got it. The reason why I mention this because this audio receiver has lots of customizations where I can adjust the audio delays, if any. I can manually set the distance for how far the surrounding speakers are at to where I usually sit, and so many other features that could very well affect how well you perceive the audio. In many cases, if some of these customizations are not properly set, you will experience delays and other audio issues. The Genesis Mini came in with everything you need to just pop it in, plug it in, and play it. It came with two controllers with lengthy cord extensions. It came with the proper HDMI cable. It came with the power supply cord, and it even came with the little box, the USB power adapter. I don't have very many cons to give to the Genesis Mini console aside from the little ones I already mentioned. But the most obvious will be that the Genesis didn't come with a 6-button controller. But the only games that really benefited from this controller in full was Street Fighter 2 and Eternal Champions. But if you're not into fighting games, then it ain't necessary to get this 6-button controller. Me, I personally love Street Fighter and Eternal Champions, so of course I had to get it for myself. There are other games in the instance of Streets of Rage 2, Shinobi 3, and Comic Zone that had a couple of features where you could map a specific move into one of the 6 buttons, and that was a minimal benefit that you could get out of having a 6-button controller for these games, but it wasn't necessary. So now let's move on to my number 1 spot, which if you've been following my videos, my channel, you would already know what my number 1 mini console is. The TurboGrafx. The TurboGrafx / PC Engine Mini, it's my number 1 mini console. I'm gonna start with the most obvious point on the pros. The amount of games you get with the TurboGrafx Mini. You get a total of 57 good puppies, 25 from the TurboGrafx library and 32 from the PC Engine catalog. When I first plugged this in to my 4K TV with the 120 Hz motion rate, the input lag was not as bad as with the other mini consoles, especially the Nintendo ones. The menu interface looks, sounds, and it just feels so nice to navigate through in comparison to the other mini consoles I already talked about. Every single game I've tested so far from the TurboGrafx Mini has played so well. The emulation, the visuals, the audio, the gameplay in general. they all play great. This is quite a fine piece of mini masterpiece. Before I proceed with the pros and cons of this mini console, there's one little pro that I want to note, which is why it's one of the things that made this console my number one. This mini console was a gift that I won through a raffle conducted by Quesadilla Pailla in celebration of his 300 subs milestone. This makes it a very special gift, not only because it came from Quesadilla Pailla, another member from the gaming community, but because I do not own a single game from this collection. Of course, I do not even have a TurboGrafx original console. Whereas with the other consoles, the Super Nintendo, the Nintendo, and the Genesis mini consoles, I own at least 95 to 98%, give or take, of the library compilations that came with those mini consoles. And by that I mean physical copies of those games. The Neo Geo, I don't own a Neo Geo either, but I personally don't even know one person who owns one. PlayStation Classic, it's one of my smallest libraries, but I do own such classic PlayStation games, those that were absent from the PlayStation Classic, such your Tomb Raiders, your Crash Bandicoots, your Spyros, and many other fighting and racing games. I don't really have any cons for the TurboGrafx Mini, but I think I should still go ahead and note these because some people may still have an issue. Me, not so much personally. First, let's go to the games that come included on this fine little masterpiece. When it comes to the PC Engine library, there are a couple games that are completely unplayable because they are in Japanese. Snatcher, The Seiken, Necromancer, and Super Momotaro Densetsu 2. Completely unplayable unless you can read Japanese. There's also a duplicate game, The Wise Book 1 and 2. This game is in both of the TurboGrafx and PC Engine libraries.
What is this bullshit all about?
If your favorite video game genre is the shmups or shoot 'em ups, this is your console to get, because there are over a dozen shoot 'em up games on this collection. Jeez, that's almost 25% of this collection, which could be a little setback if shmups are not your favorite games to go. The TurboGrafx comes only with one controller, and that sucks for those of you who may want to bring the gaming gang over for a night of gaming, because some of these games are 2 players. Some of these games in this collection are even 3 players, 2 or more players, so that means you will have to go out and buy additional controllers. Downside to that is that this is one of the most expensive controllers to get for a mini console. These are going for at least 25 bucks, whereas the rest of them for the Genesis console or the NES or the Nintendo consoles, they're averaging on the $10 to $15 each controller. But if you own one of these Sega Genesis 6-button controllers, then you are in luck, because this is the only other USB controller that I know of that is compatible with the TurboGrafx. No other USB controller that I know works with the TurboGrafx but the 6-button Genesis USB controller. Last but not least, one of the things that the TurboGrafx Mini is guilty of is that it doesn't come with a USB box adapter. You will say, well, that is no big deal, but like I was about to mention on my previous mini consoles, it could very well be a big deal. I already have tons of these boxes, and one that Quesadilla Pailla sent me exclusively for the TurboGrafx Mini. Like I already mentioned, it's not a big deal for me. It sure is something you or anyone planning to get these should keep in mind of getting the correct one. If you don't pay attention to these USB box adapters, you could very well end up harming your mini consoles or any device that requires to be plugged in through these USB boxes. If you do not pay attention to what the specific requirements of your mini consoles are, you could end up doing some bad damage to your consoles. And I want to give an additional and special shout out to Quesadilla Pailla for taking the time and effort to reach out to me and go out and order me one, even though he didn't have to. He reached out to me and gave me a heads up to make sure I wouldn't just plug in any of these extra boxes, because that is a very good point that you shouldn't do with the rest of the mini consoles if you happen to lose the boxes, because the Nintendo consoles and the Genesis Mini, they already come with their own. And I really appreciate it to infinity and beyond that Quesadilla Pailla did so in such manner. Brother, thank you so much for looking out for that. You didn't have to, but I love you for that, bro. Thank you. You are indeed one of the best. The best. Thank you, bro. So that's it. That was my mini console collection ranking. I want to thank you so much for sticking around on this video, and there are many more to come. Up next, I have another ranking of my home consoles, including a couple of portables, soon to come. Until then, I hope you have a great day. Take care of yourself, take care of your loved ones. If you ended up liking this video, don't be shy to hit the subscribe button, and I hope to see you soon. Remember, game on!